Hello, everybody. So I'm just going to tell you kind of my Ecuadorian, Colombian to Ecuadorian border story, uh, and as well kind of talk about my plans in Ecuador, which is where I am now. Uh, so yeah, some weeks ago, I started asking the Swiss couple that I met what their kind of experiences crossing the border was. So the one thing that has uh, been a thing since January is that because of the kind of mess that was here in Ecuador, they started requiring foreigners um, to have a police criminal record check. Uh, Maxime, who I biked with in Central America, um, said he didn't need this. So I thought, okay, maybe it's not enforced. But I think he didn't go through the main border crossing. Um, like he went to like a smaller border crossing, and the one that everyone goes to. Apparently, yeah, you need a criminal record check. But what the Swiss couple told me is that there's a way to avoid this, and that's by getting an invitation from somebody um, from um, from Ecuador. Now, at this point, it wasn't clear if it has to have to be somebody like very specific or what the requirements are. If it could just be any, I don't know, like Ecuadorian resident or something. The Swiss couple told me about a guy named Hans who had a finca, like a farm or a piece of land in Ecuador that I think you could stay at. Um, that was giving out invitations to cyclists. And so I knew about an Excel file that he would send to people that, you kind of fill out some information, send it back to him, and apparently he needed like at least 2 weeks or something of notice so that the people at the border would have the your name on the list, you know. Yeah. So I had his email and I tried to email him and I got no reply. I messaged the WhatsApp group of uh, traveling cyclists who are traveling in South America, because that's where the Swiss couple got their information from. And so I had one guy respond to me saying, "Okay, look, there's this guy named Hans. Here's his information." And another guy who was like, "Oh, I could invite you." Um, so yeah, so that one guy he wrote me kind of an invitation, just on through messaging, and said, okay, if anything they could call my number. It's good. So I was a little concerned because like Hans had this like more formal process, and this guy was like, it should be all right. But I'm like, okay, let's try it. Um, yeah. So, anyways, fast forward to when I got to the border. Uh, I was going there on uh pretty much expired Colombian visa. So I think it ended up being 1 day expired. Uh, so I was leaving Colombia exactly 90 days after I entered, but that kind of makes it the 91st day. So I don't know. So yeah, that's a detail. Leaving Colombia, so getting your exit stamp. They said, there was a young guy there, and he's like, "Oh, your visa seems to be 1 day expired, and do you have this criminal record check from your country?" And I'm like, "No, but there's a WhatsApp group, and there's cyclists, and they say, oh, you just need an invitation." And look, on my phone, I have an invitation, and he's like, "Oh, I'm not sure." And so an older, like, I wait around, and eventually an older guy comes, and he asks you younger, does he have the, he's like, well, more or less, and he's like, okay, uh, he's asking me, do you have a criminal police record check? No, but there's this WhatsApp cycling group, and they say, all he needs is an invitation. And he's like, well, do you have an invitation? I'm like, yes, yes, I have an invitation. Well, okay, I mean, I guess you go along, because I mean, it's the Ecuadorian people that require this sort of thing, but the Colombian people, I guess, have to make sure that I have everything as well. So I go on to get my entry stamp to Ecuador. Like I go to the Ecuadorian building, um, and I say, well, okay, they say, okay, well, do you have your police criminal record check? I'm like, no, I don't. But there's this WhatsApp group of cyclists, and they say all I need is an invitation. Here, look, I have an invitation on my phone, and she, well, first of all, there's like glass, and we couldn't really communicate. We couldn't hear each other. But also, it was pretty hard, this whole exchange. Um, but but I could see she was like looking like this. Um, and then she goes to check on the computer, and she's like, you know, I think she says like, you're not on the list. I'm like, oh, list, oh. um, so it's just like, no, no, no. So apparently invitations look good. So I'm trying to figure out, what do I need to do. So it's like, do I look? I know I could maybe message this other guy, Hans, who gives out invitations. Or I could, or here you could talk to this guy. Look, phone number. And she's not interested. Uh, yeah. And it's like, yeah, I don't know at that point. And she says something like, "Oh, maybe you need a criminal record check," or I think at one point I'm like trying to figure it out, and she's like, "Oh, go back to Colombia." Um, uh, but yeah, I don't know. And I can't really. I'm like trying to get answers, but like I said, there's this glass, and I can't hear anything. I don't know how she could hear, if she could hear anything. I think as I get a little more distressed, I think my Spanish also like declines. Like I don't know. Um. Anyway, so okay, I leave the building. Like, some people come out as well. They're like, what's happening? I try to explain the situation, and I'm like, um, there's also some security guys that come. I'm like, oh, security, uh, like, um, but they were just like, oh, do you need translation? And I start speaking back to them in Spanish. They're like, oh, okay, you're good. Um, so Uh, but then one thing they also tell me is like, oh, a criminal background check. Yeah, you just go over there, like, in between, here it's kind of like the area between Colombia and Ecuador. Like there's like a shop over there. They could help you with a criminal background check. You get internet, and okay, I guess. I mean, what do I have to lose? I go to the shop, and yeah, so apparently it's actually pretty easy for. I think it's like easier for Colombians and Ecuadorians to get the criminal background check, but like if you're from like a Western country, I don't know, you need to go to like an embassy or something to pay, right? So it's like, oh, you gotta go back to Bogota. It's like a few weeks of cycling at least. Um, yeah, either that, or uh, one option I think was to get my parents in Canada to pay in Canada. I think that might work. Um, Anyways, I'm thinking, okay, do I go back to Colombia? I don't know what I do. Okay. By the way, I also messaged the WhatsApp group again as I'm there. Then I also I messaged my contact that I got the invitation from in Ecuador, and then I also messaged Hans, the guy that like. So okay, the thing about Hans is I got his email right, and I tried to email him and I couldn't get through for some reason. But another guy also gave me his WhatsApp, so I figured, okay, well, might as well just try to call Hans, and so I explained the situation to him and apparently how it works is he gets an every week he gets an Excel file from the Ministry of Tourism in Ecuador. And then he sends the Excel file to cyclists, and they fill out their information. And then he gets that Excel file and sends it back to the Ministry of Tourism, and the Ministry of Tourism sends it to the border people, and so the border people have the list, and you got to be on the list. Um, and he was telling me it was the 13th. He was telling me the earliest I could be on the list is the 22nd, so like 9 days. Okay. So I'm like, so I mean, a big reason why I called Hans is because I wanted to make sure that okay, is there nothing I could do right now? Like, you know, it doesn't seem like it. But my other contact is like a little confused. He's like, oh, why isn't this working? I just try to explain the thing with the list. I don't know, Ministry of Tourism. He's like, no, I have a valid. He has a finca as well, and he's like a valid touristic property and everything. He's like, yeah, just let me talk to them. I'm like, okay, well, I'll try harder. Okay. I'm like, okay, might as well, So I go back to the Ecuadorian building border people, and I say, well, I mean, I try to go to the same woman. I'm like, okay, well, she talked to her before. And pretty soon, like another guy comes over. So he seems maybe to be a little higher up. I don't think he deals with people as much. He doesn't just like sit in that spot all day, um, and it's getting late at this point. It's like nighttime too, and it's like ooh, little. It's funny because like I don't know. I think like border towns are a little sketchy at night, maybe. Um, so that's kind of like people were saying like, oh, you shouldn't leave that Colombian border. You shouldn't be in the Colombian border town like at night, and going to the Ecuadorian border. I don't know. Anyways, but my point with saying that it's getting to be nighttime is because uh, it's pretty empty, and so like it's not like there's anybody waiting in line after me. Uh, so yeah. Anyways, this guy is like pretty. He seems to be more like cooperative. He's like trying to help me. Uh, and he leans like close to the close to the glass, and I lean close to so we could actually like communicate. Um, yeah. So there's different things we're trying to figure out. So um, if I have an invitation or if I have the criminal background check, I could get a 90-day visa. Yeah, which is kind of what I want. But actually, without a criminal background check and without an invitation, I could get a 10-day visa. So this is called a transit visa. It's kind of like if you're passing through Ecuador or something. But yeah, so it's not ideal, right? Because it'd be tough to bike through Ecuador in 10 days. And plus, I don't want to. I have other plans for Ecuador. Um, so, uh, but the idea is that I enter Ecuador, and then 10 days after I, leave, and at that point, hopefully, I either have a criminal record check or a an invitation. And this kind of works, right? Because remember, Hans could probably get me on the list within 9 days. Yeah, there's also the thought of me kind of trying to leave to go back into Colombia because at this point I might be stuck in between the two countries. So he is saying like, okay, if you need to go into Colombia and if they don't let you in, you come back here and we'll give you like a document and then they have to let you in. Yeah, I don't know. And he's but yeah, but we're toying around with this idea of um going through going into Colombia and then coming out. Sorry, going into Ecuador with a transit visa and then coming out and then going back in with and then at that point I would have like 80 days from there. Uh so one problem is that Colombia might not let me back in, I think, because I need to like actually leave and come back. Uh at that point, so like there's like ideas of like trying to get to like a Peruvian border somewhere, and then I explained to him as well. I'm like, "Ooh, I don't know. I biking would be tough. It's not what I want to do. I pretty much have to take a bus just to get to the border over there, just to go back. Um, yeah, but I don't know. I figure there's also a chance, like again, like maybe I do the 10-day visa thing and then I come back out, and I guess Colombia would have to let me in maybe because Ecuador can't let me in maybe. So I'm pretty ready to Um, so I'm pretty ready at this point to, try the transit visa thing. And he's the guy's like kind of checking my passport. He's like, "Oh, what did you do for 90 days in Colombia?" I tell him like, I maybe spend like half the day resting and the other half the day biking, half the time biking and looking at like other stuff in my passport. Um but yeah, and he's like, what did he do? Well, the point is, like, he put something in my passport and stamp, and he's like, "Okay, you have 90 days," and I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, I know. I spent 90 days in Colombia. Yep, yep, yep." And he's like, "No, 90." I'm like, "Oh, here, 90 days." So yeah, he just, I'm like, "Yes, thank you." So it just, I don't know if they got tired of me or. Uh, like I think it's a combination of like, okay, my situation is like um y- you know difficult enough, I guess, to be let through. And then I think he was also like, when he was looking at my passport and asking me stuff, he was conducting like a criminal background check pseudo thing. Anyways, so yeah, I guess I don't know, they just got yeah, they got tired of me and let me through. Maybe. Um, but yeah, here I am in Ecuador. I'm in Tulcan. I've been here for uh, longer than would have wanted to be. I don't know. I just, yeah, yeah. Um, uh, yeah. And but the plans to leave tomorrow. Um, and my plans for Ecuador are to um do what's called the Trans-Ecuadorian mountain bike route. Um, so yeah, it's like it's a bike packing route on bikepacking.com. So it's similar to the Great Divide mountain bike route in like the States, which I've done a part of. Um, so have 2-inch tires. They recommend at least 2.25. Um, yeah, I don't know. They recommend being pretty light. I don't think I'm that light. Like my bicycle, I mean. um, but it seems cool. It seems like a lot of nature and mountains and stuff. They recommend going at a certain point of the year where it's when it's dry. I'm not at that point of the year. Yeah, I'm quite nervous about getting wet. I don't know. I'm thinking about buying like rubber boots or something. Anyways, that's my story, and that's those are my plans for Ecuador. Um, yeah, hope you enjoyed.